All right, let's get started. Thank you very much for those of you that have taken your time to come and attend live. I appreciate it. Hopefully I can answer some questions or make your time worthwhile here. I'll just go over a few things that I want to cover, just standard admin type items. We are entering week 10 according to the syllabus, which is chapter 8. So we have a chapter 8 quiz due on Friday next. We also have a discussion for the second post that's due on Friday. A couple notes that I get periodic email, and just to remind folks, if you are late on the first post, it's just a flat 10% penalty for that. So please don't give up on the entire discussion because of that. As long as you post your your first post by the time the second post is due, and then presumably you're going to post your second post as well, you're still going to get close to full marks. You're going to be working at a 90% there. The other thing to consider is we are a best 4 out of 5 discussions in this course. So if you just don't have time, if there's too much going on, feel free to skip a discussion post, right? A discussion entirely, both posts, right? So yeah, you certainly have that option. I don't get real excited when the first post is late. The only reason I impose that deadline is so that people who are staying according to schedule have other people's posts to read and to respond to. It obviously would not work if I made both posts due by the second Friday, because if everyone did 2 posts together, no one would have a first post to work off of. And I want that continuity. So it's not a big deal if you're late. There's a flat penalty. It doesn't matter if you're a day late or 4 days late, as long as you get it in by the deadline, then we'll certainly still mark that. And just a reminder, when we're marking, we're up to the point in the course where when we mark, we're just giving marks. So we're not giving a lot of feedback. We've found that that's not very efficient. The people that aren't learning from the feedback are the people that are perpetuating their errors and saying the same things over and over and over again, like 2 posts are required, or you have to use citations and references. Those sorts of things. If you say it once and someone doesn't get it, well, we tried twice, so someone doesn't get it after twice. It's kind of pointless, right? So you just expect marks, but do look at when you get that feedback, there's still feedback in that you can see what section of the rubric you lost marks on. So I had a student reach out to me and say, well, I believe I did my citations correctly and my references correctly, but yet I still didn't get a good mark or a perfect mark or whatever the student said. And I looked at the feedback, meaning the marks feedback, the rubric, and they had full marks for the citations. So I totally agree with them. They did the citations and references correctly. So do spend some time looking at that, and look at your previous feedback. If you haven't already, look at your older feedback, and often the mistakes that we make, if we haven't looked at feedback, are the same mistakes we've been making all along. So take a look at that. So that's due on Friday. Also, surprise, on Friday, the term paper is due. So my last class that I was just speaking at, 1620, also has a term paper due, and their term paper is due on Tuesday. So they had quite a few questions about the term paper, though I've covered these things in the past. The thing that I want to highlight is the format has to be Word format. I won't be accepting anything but Word format. I'm just going to pull up the correct page in Blackboard here. Just looking under our assignments. So it's nicely bolded, point 5. Your paper must be submitted in Word format as a single document. No other format is acceptable, and we reserve the right to reject other formats. Not only do I reserve the right, I will be rejecting all other formats. So a couple things. If I see that you've submitted in something other than Word before the due date, I will bring it to your attention. I don't make any promises. I will try to do that. It's not my responsibility to do that. I'll be helpful and do that if I see that. If it's after the due date, you will get an automatic 10% penalty for that, for submitting in the wrong format. So please don't do it. The reason, though, I'm not just trying to be, hard on the students or whatever the perception may be. The reason I require Word format is that the plagiarism detector works best in Word. So that's why I'm doing it. We always run the students' submissions through a plagiarism detector, and I don't want any nefarious student to skirt that detection by using some format other than the Word format, which works really, really well for plagiarism detection. So that's the reason why. That's why I insist on Word format. I don't care if it's doc or docx or anything granular like that. So hopefully you're at the point now, or by the end of the weekend, you're at a decent version of your submission and you're just doing final edits. That would be best. Some of you are not going to be that far along, but my advice to you for the best marks is to not hand me your first version. Do at least a couple revisions, look through it, make sure, reread it, check it for spelling and grammar. The last class asked me about using Grammarly or anything like that. Sure, use any tools you can. It's better for you and better for me. It's much more enjoyable to mark something that's well written than something that's poorly written. And you get your point across much better, and you have much more credibility. If you start blasting, a bunch of spelling and grammatical errors, you lose credibility. That's the first thing that you lose. So people don't take your submissions as seriously as they would if they're well written. Hopefully some of you saw my announcement that I posted yesterday, I think it was, and that was Jordan Peterson and his comments. It's just ironically a 10 deck slide. The PDF link is there for download. Just commenting on why you want to learn to write well and be articulate. And his point, and I don't know how well people know who he is, but he's internationally recognized, controversial, interesting figure that thinks very well, is eloquent and articulate. And you can see him on YouTube and on TV shows and such, talking to some of the philosophical thought leaders and particularly people with woke liberal leanings. He tends to speak against those people as a counter argument. His statement is, if you write well, you think well. So, and that I believe that. I've always believed that. I believe that when you learn how to structure an argument in an essay form, and you have to do that in a certain number of words, and you have to revise and make your arguments better and stronger, that you become a better thinker. And ultimately, that's why we're at university. There's typically in university, there's not a ton of skills that are taught, like direct skills. I mean, there's engineering and there's chemicals, like chemistry labs and things like that. But what we're really here to do is to learn how to think. So that's that. It was nice to see someone of that caliber make that kind of a statement. So sometimes I see my professor comments, and people talk about a specific comment was in my 3750 class, in my online marketing class. If I'd wanted to write a lot, I would have taken an English class. Well, just a statement like that is incredibly ignorant in terms of understanding what you're here for at all. You don't come to university to not learn how to think. That's the primary goal of university, is to allow you to take this knowledge of how to think and apply it to whatever you do in life. So anyways, soapbox over. Hopefully you're in the polished stage of your essay, and I can look forward to seeing some really good submissions on Friday. I see some questions coming up. The rubric mentioned that we need to present how data was used or can be used in a criminal and or civil format. Should we use real cases or can we use examples? So ideally, real cases would be great. If you can't find real cases, or if the way you're structuring your essay doesn't lean towards that, you can talk hypothetically or theoretically. It's probably best, if you can, to find real cases, because I don't suspect that there's many students in the course that have spent time in court, testifying, being an expert witness, understanding how the process works. So it's probably helpful to start with real cases and at least build some base on that and maybe speculate beyond that. Do we need to include our student number in the title page? If so, is it okay to place it beside my name? I can't find any explanations online as to where to put student number on the title page. Okay, so let me be really clear. APA formatting, which I require, is required for the citations and the reference list. I don't really care how you structure the title page. I just want one. So I don't care about running headers and things like that. If you want to follow the Word APA format, I think it's version 7 now, you can do, but it's not necessary. What I'm concerned about is to make sure that your citations are in APA format and your corresponding references in the reference list are also in APA format. That's my concern. So if you want to do a title page with a picture on it, and please don't use Comic Sans, but if you, as long as you put your name, your student number, the date, things like that. I don't deduct marks for title pages unless there's no title page. I'm much more worried about the content of your term paper than I am the title page, but I like the exercise of just wrapping it, making it a formal submission. Does that help you out, Beth? Okay, awesome. I'm just trying to think of other questions that I dealt with in the previous class in terms of the term paper. The one of the things that I did talk about with them, and I'll just talk about, not necessarily for the people that are here live, but maybe someone watching has a similar question. The quality of references matters. I say things like that. You guys have an advantage over the previous class that I was just talking to, Introduction to Information Systems, because you're doing discussion. So really all that you're doing here is a more formal version of a discussion, right? You're going up to 1,500 words, but you're going to have an introduction, you're going to have a conclusion. But I mean, really, you should have that within your discussion, but might not be a full paragraph, introduction and conclusion, right? You're doing a bigger version. You've been citing using APA, you've been doing reference lists with APA if you're doing things properly. So you have a big advantage. You've had a few times to practice, a few few messages of feedback from myself and the other markers. So hopefully you can just apply that, slap a title page on it, and make it just a little wee bit more formal. And that's how your term paper should look. Okay, so going back to my original point, I say even in the discussions that the quality of references matters. And what I mean by that is the best possible references come from Google Scholar with peer-reviewed articles. So you've got someone that's an expert in the field writing an article reviewed by other experts in the field. And that's just an excellent way to get unbiased, solid, scientific information published. In your topics, there's going to be lots of them purposely that don't have a lot of peer-reviewed papers on them, right? There's some very interesting topics that are fairly cutting edge in terms of peer-reviewed papers, or maybe there's only one or two. So obviously you can't have 10 or more peer-reviewed papers normally for these term papers. Use good sources. So a good source might be a newspaper article, it might be a magazine article, It might be an expert's video on the subject, those sorts of things. What you want to avoid, and the stuff that I'm trying to avoid, and I've talked about this previously, is if you're talking about a service provider and you say in your paper, this service provider is the best service provider, and then you cite that service provider's website, that's obviously a horrible biased source. So it's a garbage source. Don't do that. I very seldom am critical of the sources that people use unless they make outrageous statements and support them with crappy sources. So to say you can have only 10 sources at a maximum, no, the 10 sources is a minimum. So 10 references. If you refer to assignments, under assignments, you should be able to see your term paper with your topic, and it will say things like, just scanning through here, write a formal paper of 1,200 to 1,500 words, double spaced, 12-point Arial or Times New Roman. You must use a minimum of 10 in-text citations and corresponding list of 10 or more references. So often you're going to use a reference more than once, but you need 10 references in there, okay? So 10 references, if you only cite them once, typically almost every sentence, except in the introduction and conclusion, you're in the middle of your body, almost every sentence should have a citation. Not necessarily everyone, but almost everyone. So you should be able to get those citations in there, no problem, but you need 10 sources, 10 references to work from. The other thing the other class asked me about was how many quotes can I use? Do I need to use quotes? My advice is to use exactly and precisely 0 quotes. If you feel strongly that a quote adds to the value of your paper and you can't do it by paraphrasing with the same impact, use 1. If you really want to push your boundaries, use 2. If you get up above 2, it's going to be detrimental 100% of the time. And I say that because I read and mark a lot of papers, and papers that are filled with quotes are very hard to read, and they don't contain your thoughts. All they contain is the words of some other author. So it's hard to assess how to mark a paper that is just a bunch of quotes, right? There's no, you're just cutting and pasting quotes. And so at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is for you to have attacked the topic, digested the information, spewed it out in your own words, not so paraphrasing, not copying and pasting sentences and putting a couple of synonyms in there. So I have students that try that every year. That's called plagiarism. That's a academic offense. So don't do that. Put it in your own words entirely. Digest the information and regurgitate it in a way that is unique to you, that's said in your words. I get it, once in a while something is so well said by the subject matter expert that you can't rephrase it that well. That's the time, one time per paper, that you might want to use a quote. If it's controversial, if it's eye-catching, if it's just really, really excellently said, then you might want to quote it. Don't make it a big quote either. Don't try and fill up 300 words of your 1,500 word essay with someone else's words. That won't go over well either. Okay. Another caution, every term, don't forget, I taught this for a long time. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of students every term, so I've seen an awful lot of papers. Every term, there'll be a certain small percentage of people that write the paper in their first language, and they rely on Google Translate to put it into English. That will not work. It will come out like garbage. It'll be very obvious to me what has happened, but more importantly, we're not at the technological level where Google Translate can translate your thoughts accurately. So you need to write it in English and not rely on Google Translate. It just doesn't translate. It just doesn't come out the way you want it to do. So just another caution there. Should we make sure our word count is below 1,500 or is going over by a few words? Okay. So I'm really slack about that to a certain extent. Let me sort of set some parameters. If it's 1,550 words, I couldn't care less. Students sometimes ask me whether you count citations and word count. I don't care. If you do and it's over by 50 words, and if you don't, it's under. I typically, when I write, I count them in there because I'm too lazy to count the words and exclude the number of words that are citations. So the answer is I'm indifferent if it's just a little over 1,500. Last office hours, the last class that I spoke with office hours an hour ago, someone asked me, I've got 1,989 words. Is that acceptable? The answer is no. That's too long. It's not that it's unacceptable. It's not that I won't read it and mark it, but you're going to lose marks for it being too long, for sure. If it's 1,550, 1,575, I really don't care. But you start getting much longer than that. And honestly, as I said, my process is always to spew out all my thoughts and then cut it down to the right number of words. So usually when I see something that comes in at 2,000 words, it's got 1,500 words worth of content and 500 words of garbage. And I don't mean to be, ignorant or critical about it, but it's 500 words that could be cut out. So there's things like narration where people say, in the current state of affairs, comma, blah, 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 blah. That's just way too wordy, and it's totally unnecessary. You can get rid of that entire clause without losing any value. So look for things like that. If you're over the word count, look for things like that to get rid of. If you're under the word count and you're trying to beef it up by putting stuff like that in there, you're kind of wasting your time because you're diluting the content. We're looking for real content. We're not looking for narration and such. So the provided video, I'm just going to click over to it. The provided video under course content general, and that is the academic skills proofreading strategies video. I asked them to do this a couple of years ago, a year or two ago, I think. It's excellent. Please spend the time to watch that. It'll have an impact on your academic career and maybe your life. If you can write well, you will succeed where a lot of people will not. Writing well is a skill that most people simply don't have. So one of my main goals, and I've said this from the very first office hours on, one of my goals with all the courses that I teach is for students to come out as better writers than they come in with. There are some people that write really, really well, but honestly, it's rare. It's rare for me to see that even in my third year class, and most people can't write very well. So there's always room for improvement, but I find if I look at discussion posts from the first discussion post to the fifth discussion group of posts, I see a great improvement in a fairly high percentage of students. So watch that video. I think it's 22 minutes and 46 seconds, according to my notes there. It's well worth your time. If you're impatient like me, watch it at 1.5 times, whatever. Just spend the time to do it. It will impact your writing ability immediately. Okay, and selfishly for me, it means I get better papers that are much more enjoyable to mark than those that haven't been properly proofread and revised. All right. There's also, by the way, if you're not aware, there's also a citations and formatting using APA 7th edition, another one I requested that academic skills do. I don't know how long that is, but if you have any doubts, you might as well not lose marks for just not doing it properly. I started the course off with that mandatory course requirements quiz, and one of the questions was references and one of the questions was citations. And of course, you've been doing it in discussions. If you've been getting full marks, you've got it. You've figured it out. carry that on. Don't give away marks. Don't make it easy for markers to take away marks because you couldn't be bothered to learn how to do APA properly. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions for me? Just checking to make sure I didn't miss any. I think I've covered everything. If you don't have questions, feel free to get on with your Saturday. Once again, thank you so much for coming by and asking the questions. It's good for me, it's good for you, it's good for your peers in the class that watch the video as well. So lots of things going on this week, pretty busy week. And then after that, we'll ease off for a week and then we'll be getting ready for the final. We'll talk about the final at length before the final. Hopefully everyone registered as to where they want to write the final. The default, as I've said before, is Peterborough. So if you didn't respond to Trent Online and state that you want to take an online exam or write in Durham, you're writing Peterborough. That's the default. So, and we won't be making changes after the fact. So hopefully everyone did that. We talked about that last week as well. Anyways, that's all I got. If anyone wants to stay around and talk to me privately, please do. Otherwise, get on with your day and good luck on the term paper and have a good weekend. Thanks, guys.